If we check the political compass, we can see kleptocracy. Now, what the hell is kleptocracy? Kleptocracy is a government where the politicians use their power to steal money from the common citizen and use that money for their own personal gains. Plain and simple, it is corruption. Politicians take money from the tax system and use it to buy some shiny shit, or they use that stolen money to subvert the governmental structure in their favor and ensure that they can stay in power in an illegal way. Globalization has made the problem of corruption kinda worse, since there's so many ways that a person can hide their stolen asset. For example, a corrupted politician can just transfer the stolen money in a country with strong property rights and make the money harder to track. But this is just one example. There's other more complicated way that globalization has made corruption easier. Since corruption is a global phenomenon, every country has corruption on a small or big scale. So every country could technically be classified as a kleptocracy. Not everyone will agree at which scale of corruption a country can now be classified as a kleptocracy. But generally speaking, when a country's corruption goes so much out of control that any semblance of a real democracy goes out the window, this country is a kleptocracy. The country that gets the most call a kleptocracy is Russia, which is often referred to as a mafia state. With the dissolution of the USSR, Boris Yeltsin wanted the Russian Federation to transition from a state-controlled economy to a free market economy. The sensible thing to do would have been to make the transition slow and gradual. But Boris had no time for this nonsense. There were still pro-USSR politicians in the Russian government who wanted the state to control the economy. A quick transition to capitalism will make these communist enthusiasts understand that Russia will be capitalist, bucko. Boris started to privatize the country and launched a voucher privatization program. Vouchers were distributed freely and equally to the Russian population. These vouchers could later be exchanged for shares in the public enterprise that would soon transition to a private enterprise. The goal of this program was to distribute the wealth more equally among the Russian population and avoid an handful of few to get all the money. Unfortunately, the program failed miserably. There is two crucial problems that the program failed to address. First, the Russian people had been living in a state-controlled economy for a long-ass time, so they probably did not really understand on what having shares in a private business meant. Secondly, the average Russian was poor as shit. The rapid privatization of Russia caused the country to go in an extreme hyperinflation. Consumer price would rise up to 2,000 times what they were before the dissolution of the USSR. Since most Russians were struggling to live, they were more than willing to sell their vouchers to anyone. And the people who would buy vouchers were usually people who had the luxury to buy these without struggling to live. And these people traveled all around the country to get as many vouchers as possible. So the vouchers got accumulated in the hands of a few, and the first wave of Russian oligarchs were born. Then in 1996, the first election in the Russian Federation was to take place. And Boris was in deep shit. He was incredibly unpopular. Russia knew that their life was miserable because of him, and everyone expected Zhukanov, the leader of the Communist Party, to be the winner of the election. Boris needed a plan to win, so he struck a deal with the oligarchs. The oligarch would give money to Boris so he could finance his campaign, and the oligarchs would do everything in their power to make Boris win the election. In exchange, Boris would offer even more shares to the oligarchs. The oligarchs of course accepted the deal. Against all odds, Boris won the election, and the oligarchs got even more filthy rich and Russia got even more privatized. Now for the next election, everybody knew that re-electing Boris was just not an option. So they needed someone else to rule with the oligarchs' interest in mind. They chose to put ex-KGB agent Vladimir Putin as prime minister. Boris unexpectedly resigned, so Putin took his place as president. Vladimir Putin was pretty much a nobody to the Russian public. The oligarchs probably thought that putting a seemingly unimportant person at the place of president, they could easily manipulate him into doing everything they want. They were dead wrong. As president, Putin started to talk shit about the oligarchs. What was going on? Was he outplaying the oligarchs and wanted to become a hero, a true benevolent ruler, just wanting to serve the interests of the Russian people? Well, not really. In his time as president, some oligarchs were either exiled, imprisoned, or died under mysterious circumstances. But they will later be replaced by another person to take the place as the oligarchs. It seems that Putin had no intention to be controlled by the oligarchs, and for that he needed to replace some of them with other people that would be loyal to him. And this is exactly what he accomplished. Don't be fooled. Vladimir Putin did not abolish the oligarchy, he simply replaced it. And ever since his presidency, Putin and the new oligarchy have ruled Russia like gangsters, doing anything they want since they are untouchable. There was this time in between 2008 and 2012 where Russia was ruled by Dmitry Medvedev. However, most people believe that it wasn't entirely him who was calling the shot. Either he ruled the country equally with Putin, or it was entirely Putin who was calling the shot, and Vladimir retook the place as president since 2012. Some claim that since the USSR dissolution, the Russian oligarchs have stolen up to $1 trillion to the Russian people, and Putin, which his official position as the president only grant him $140,000 per year. Some experts believe that his assets could be reaching up to $200 billion. However, all of this would later go on to bite the oligarch and Putin in the ass. When Russia invaded Ukraine, everybody thought that Russia would just whoop Ukraine off the map, since on paper, Russia is way more stronger than Ukraine. But to say that Russia have underperformed in the war would be putting it mildly. It's weird, it's as if they were unprepared for their own invasion. How come? Well, one big reason for it is the corruption. It seems that a lot of money that was supposed to go to the military were instead going into someone else's pocket. And because of that, instead of a decisive military victory, 2 years later, Russia is stuck in a stalemate against Ukraine.